Well, not all of us have the attention span to read long articles, and I'm one of those people. So knowing this, I thought I would do a audio version of an article written by Jim Walker entitled, "Did a Historical Jesus Exist?" Originally written June 12, 1997, modified January 10th, 1998. I'm obviously not going to read the whole thing because it's very long, but this will be part one of me reading this article. And I'm hoping I can get my computer to cooperate, because after a while, if nothing happens on the computer screen, the picture that you're looking at right now of this beautiful sunset will go away. And I'm not sure how to keep it from happening. So if it goes away, I'm just going to keep reading because it's too much of a pain in the ass to try to go back and do it over. So we're just kind of move the mouse every now and then, and I hope that keeps it alive. Okay, so the article, "Did a Historical Jesus Exist?" by Jim Walker. You can find this online. You just need to Google that title. Amazingly, the question of an actual historical Jesus rarely confronts the religious believer. The power of faith has so forcefully driven the minds of believers and even apologetic scholars that the question of reliable evidence has been obscured and bogged down with tradition, religious subterfuge, and outrageous claims. The following gives a brief outlook about the claims of a historical Jesus and why the evidence the Christians present us cannot serve as justification for reliable evidence for a historical Jesus. All claims of Jesus derive from hearsay accounts. No one has the slightest physical evidence from a historical Jesus. No artifacts, dwellings, works of carpentry, or self-written manuscripts. All claims about Jesus derive from writings of other people. There occurs not a single contemporary writing that mentions Jesus. All historical documents about Jesus were written after the life of the alleged Jesus from either unknown authors, people who had never met an earthly Jesus, or from fraudulent writings. Although many of these claims can be argued as fraudulent, I will use the information and dates to show that even if these sources were not fraudulent, they could still not serve as reliable evidence for a historical Jesus. Hearsay means information derived from another source, or evidence based on the reports of others rather than on witnesses themselves. Courts of law do not generally allow hearsay as testimony, nor does, honest modern scholarship. Hearsay provides no proof or good evidence, and therefore we should dismiss it. If anyone does not understand this, imagine yourself confronted with a charge for a crime which you know that you did not commit. You feel confident that you cannot be blamed because you know that there exists no evidence whatsoever for the charge against you. Now, imagine that you're presented in a court of law that allows hearsay as evidence, good enough for conviction. However, when the prosecution presents its case, everyone who takes a stand against you says that you committed the crime, but not as a witness themselves, but solely because they say other people said so. None of these other people, mind you, ever show up, nor can they be found. Hearsay does not work as evidence because we have no way of knowing whether the person is lying or simply basing his information on a wrongful belief. We know from history about witchcraft trials and kangaroo courts that hearsay is neither reliable or fair. We know that mythology can arise out of no good information whatsoever. We continually live in a world infested with beliefs of demons, UFOs, ghosts, Loch Ness monsters, and an innumerable number of fantasies believed as fact taken from nothing but belief and hearsay. It is for these reasons why hearsay cannot serve as good evidence, and the same reasoning must be applied for the claims of a historical Jesus. The Bible Gospels. The most authoritative accounts of a historical Jesus come from the 4 Gospels of the Bible. Note that these Gospels did not come into the Bible as original and authoritative from the authors themselves, but rather from the influence of a church father named Irenaeus of Lyon, who lived in, turning the page, who lived in the middle of the 2nd century. Many heretical Gospels were around at that time, but Irenaeus considered only 4 for mystical reasons. He said that there were only 4 in number, like the 4 zones of the world, the 4 winds, the 4 divisions of man's estate, and the 4 forms of the first living creatures, the lion of Mark, the calf of Luke, the man of Matthew, the eagle of John. See Against the Heresies. The 4 Gospels then became church canon for the Orthodox faith. Most of the other claimed Gospel writings were burned, destroyed, or lost. Elaine Pago writes, although the Gospels of the New Testament, like those discovered at Nag Hammadi, are attributed to Jesus' followers, no one knows who exactly wrote any of them. Nor do we know who wrote them. Not only do we not know who wrote them, consider also that none of the Gospels were written during the alleged life of Jesus. Nor do the unknown authors make the claim to have met an earthly Jesus. Add to this that none of the original manuscripts exist. We only have copies of copies. The consensus of most biblical historians put the dating of the earliest gospel, that of Mark, at some time after 70 CE, and the last gospel, John, after 90 CE. That would make it some 40 years after the alleged crucifixion of Jesus that we have any gospel writings that mention him. The traditional church has portrayed the authors as the apostles, Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John. But we know from critical textual research that there simply exists no evidence that the authors, whoever they were, could have been the apostles described in the gospel stories. Yet even today we hear priests and ministers describing these authors as the actual apostles. Many Bibles still continue to label the stories as the Gospel according to St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke, St. John. No apostle would have announced his own sainthood before the church's establishment of sainthood. As an experiment, imagine the Gospels without their titles. See if you can find out from the text who wrote them and what their names were. Even if the text supported the notion that it was written by apostles, consider that the average lifespan of humans in the 1st century was about 30, and very few people lived to 70. If the apostles were about the same age of Jesus while he lived, that would put Mark at least 70 years old and John at over 110. The Gospel of Mark describes the first written Bible gospel. And although Mark appears deceptively after the Matthew Gospel, the Gospel of Mark was written at least a generation before Matthew. From its own words, we can deduce that the author of Mark had neither heard Jesus nor been his personal follower. Whoever he was, he simply accepted the mythology of Jesus without question and wrote a crude and ungrammatical account of the popular story at the time. Any careful reading of the 3 synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, will reveal that Mark is the common element between Matthew and Luke. It was the main source for both of them. Of Mark's 666 verses, some 600 appear in Matthew, some 300 in Luke. According to Randall Helms, the author of Mark, according to Randall Helms, the author of Mark, whoever he was, stands at least at a third removed from Jesus, and more likely at the fourth remove. Okay, well that's where I'm going to end part 1. I'm sorry for all the flubs. I obviously am not a professional reader, so there's going to be flubs. I'm holding the camera with one hand, trying to keep the computer from shutting down with the other, and trying to read this article. But it's a really good article. It's an article that makes you think, and that's why I think people should know about it. If they don't find it online and have the gumption to read all 17 pages, I thought maybe I could do an audio version of it. So this is part 1, and part 1 is ending now. And I will put up part 2. I will put up the other parts. Hopefully there won't be more than 5 parts. This is as much as I can do right now. So anyway, that's all. Thank you for listening. Bye.